Fruits. I
Yeah.
love them. You love them. What's the
Yep.
best fruit?
Pineapple. Fresh
Strawberry.
pineapple. Ooh. Yeah. Maybe a fresh strawberry or watermelon.
Yeah.
Chase, if this is just a weird way of you talking about how you monstrously eat an apple, I don't want to hear that again.
I mean, I did monstrously eat an apple like an hour ago. So I won't tell you.
You're
that.
a monster.
I like a good peach. Like
Love
like a good crisp peach.
Too sloppy.
It still has some firmness to it. Well, yeah, I prefer like the firm. I'm not talking about like the peaches that you'd get in the juice in the little individual cups. That's just
fresh
slime.
peach.
Yeah, I mean like biting in to a fuzzy peach and having that white flesh.
Yeah, it's fair.
Cold, nice cold.
I'm gonna stand by strawberry, man. Strawberry's fucking good.
Redfall in stores now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, welcome
Hi.
to the Casual Hour.
What's going on here?
Well, this is technically a deep dive, right? So isn't this mine? Isn't this what I do?
But go for it. It's awkward now.
Welcome to the Casual Hour, a podcast ostensibly about video games, but mostly about one Xbox interview. I'm your host, Chase Kennecke.
You're not really the host. You're just doing a segment, but go for it.
I'm your guest host, Chase Kennecke, and along with me is the normal host, Bobby Pease. Hello, Bobby.
Hi.
And that other guy, Johnny Amazich. Hi, Johnny.
Hi, Chase.
Welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here.
Great to be here.
You know, I've got some. It's been a tough week for the Casual Hour. It's been a tough week for video games. Things are so tough, and you guys are really brave for coming on this show to do this interview as I discuss.
It's a tough week starting right now.
Tough. I don't know.
This is a tough week because it's the week leading up to.
That's
Tears
true.
of the Kingdom.
It's been extremely tough for the
Finish
two of
your
you.
fucking food, Johnny. Then we'll talk about what you can eat next. You get no dessert until you eat your meal.
I don't wanna.
Yeah, they all want the Zelda. Anyway, why don't we talk about some video games before we get into the deep dive, where we will also talk about video games, but in a slightly different way. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. You know what? I'm hosting this show, so I'm going to say I won't go first. Johnny, what have you been playing these days?
Oh, Chase, I have been doing my damnedest to get through Jedi Survivor before Tears of the Kingdom comes out, and I just texted.
You?
Not yet. I texted Bobby because it feels like I'm getting close to the end.
Okay.
And I'm at the end.
Did he confirm that you are near the end?
I'm at the end of the penultimate chapter of the story.
Wow.
And I think I'm going to try and mainline it because there's a lot of side stuff I need to do or would like to do, like the bounties and stuff. I think.
Well, sure. There's so many more mullets out there.
I'm saving that stuff for when the game gets patched up a bit more. I decided.
Yeah, so I'm more concerned about finishing the story and then enjoying the rest of the side stuff later on because I fucking love that game.
I mean, without doing some major spoiler for the audience or even me, I guess I will probably eventually play that game. What is something that you have come across that has surprised and excited you?
Like how much more I enjoy the movement, and like I talked about this a little bit last week. Like it feels so much better to play than the first game did, and I'm still playing on the normal difficulty, whereas I had long past the point I am now in the first game. I had cranked it all the way down because it was just too frustrating to deal with. And the new stances, I think, are very pleasantly surprising.
Yeah. Have you stuck with the same stances you had last week, or have you switched it up a little bit?
I still rocking the blaster and the crossguard stance. I have both of those fully upgraded at this point, I think, and I can fuck shit up with those.
The blaster one seems rude. Like, hey, yes, I'm an honorable Jedi who's got a lightsaber, and we're gonna have this noble battle. But also, fuck yeah, I got a gun.
Yeah, and there are some cool animations that happen, like whenever you're finishing off a stormtrooper, like reaching behind you and blasting them when they just have a sliver of health left. And Cal even makes a comment whenever you first get it. He's like, my master said that blasters were, not the right thing to do, to use.
It's a less civilized age now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, have you seen anybody do that on any other property?
What, sword and gun together?
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy. There's a guy who put them together.
I'm talking about Star Wars.
In the one thing.
Talking about Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, probably, but I can't think of.
Well, you've had a lot to say about cross guards. I just figured you were an expert on all the other Star Wars stances that people use. So,
but yeah, man, it's so good. BD1 is a lot more involved in solving a lot of like the environmental puzzles and things, which I think is pretty cool. He gets a couple of unique abilities that you use. I just unlocked another one, like at this point in the game. And like story wise, I've heard some people say that it took a while to draw them in. I was bought in from the beginning just because I loved the story in the first one so much. That's what pulled me through. And I'm really, really liking what they're doing with the narrative now, and all the new side characters and the returning characters as well.
I'll answer that question, Chase. The biggest surprise for me is like I actually care about Cal Kestis in this one, and I did not give two shits about Cal in that first one.
Yeah,
I don't know how I feel about that.
I think they do a good job fleshing him out more. He's a much different person in this than the person you left, and I think that shows quite a bit. One of my favorite moments in the game, it's been in the trailer a bit too, so I don't mind talking about it, but you are in Coruscant when it opens, and there's a shot of going by the temple, which is now basically kitted out to look like an Empire base, and Cal's sitting down, and he stands up, and you see the look over his shoulder, and then the camera swings around, and you're looking at his face look at it, and it's just such like a powerful moment of him seeing that place in that state now and just reflecting on it. It's really well done, and I think that set the tone for who he had to become in this game. And I also think that not only himself, but the characters around him, some of which that just like kind of bugged me in the first game alongside with him, are actually people that I was really excited to go deeper into, and they all are different in their own ways. Like, it's neat to see the events surrounding them that they don't really put under the spotlight in this, that we know what's happening alongside. Like, this game is taking place at the exact same time that Kenobi is, the series. And so we know the events that are surrounding it, but they don't bleed into this. There might be references of characters, but they don't bring any of the stuff into it. And I just think that
it has none of that baggage. Like, even though, like, you know, spoiler for the end of the last game, like, Vader does show up, but he's directly in charge of the people you've been fighting the whole time. So
he doesn't just show up out of nowhere to go, oh, hey, I'll take
somehow
this,
Vader survived. I'll double down on what Johnny said too. I think that not only does the movement feel better, but there are some moments in this game that like kind of crib on Celeste shit. Like, there's some stuff that you're doing that feels
there's some
wild.
Uncharted level of like action sequences that take place. There's one specifically that is going to be like pretty high up for like moment of the year for me.
And the last other thing I'll share on just the world design here is the first time you got to go to these planets that you knew the name of, that was cool from like a Star Wars fanboy perspective, but they always felt like they were being contained into a silo. Like, they were always just out of reach when you were on them, and this feels like you can.
It was something in like KOTOR. It's like, oh yeah, hey, you're on Kashyyyk, but you're on this very specific part of Kashyyyk, and you're not really going to get to see much of anything. Like, there's four trees, and that's it. And now you're going to go down to the bottom forest part, and that's whatever.
So having the flexibility to like bump between planets and have like a hub world, I think, has also made this feel a lot more approachable and unique in that sense from a world building standpoint. They've done just a really great job. I echo Johnny. It is a fantastic video game. I hit credits on it and I'm loving it. Love it.
Very cool. Yep. Very cool. Johnny, anything else?
Yeah. I've been spending a little bit of time with that Cassette Beast game. And it is very cool. I'm still like only like an hour and 20 minutes into it, but I will piggyback off of Bobby's opinion and say Cassette Beast fucking rules. And those critters, I like the critter design and the fusion system. Like, they have a lot of really cool ideas that they're bringing into it, and I'm excited to play more. Just been playing it on the old Steam Deck.
I was hoping to have that done tonight when I talk to you guys, but I am in like the elite Four territory. There's not really an Elite Four, but like that. That's
you
the
can tell
place.
it's like the end.
I'm on Victory Road. Let's just say that much.
Cool.
And there's some cool cassettes you can find later on, Johnny.
I'm real excited to
like
see
a
more of that game.
like a nice Boston cassette. Nice.
Yeah, that has been it for me. Like this week has been all about like just waiting for Zelda to come out. But Jedi has been keeping my attention like pretty successfully.
The video game equivalent of waiting for Godot.
Yep.
Just waiting for Zelda.
Waiting for Guffman.
Yes.
Cool.
I don't know. We're just naming movies now. Bobby, outside of Cassette Beast and Jedi Survivor, what have you been playing this week or this last week?
I've been playing a lot of stuff, man. You know me. I stay busy. And
I do know you.
I've got 2 new games for you this week.
Okay.
I've been checking out not What the Golf. I'm sorry. I was going to talk to you about What the Golf, but the follow-up, I don't know if it's follow-up, but the same studio that brought us What the Golf has put out another Apple Arcade exclusive game called What the Car.
This is a very dumb name, and I like it.
This is made by Triband. Again, this is only available on Apple's arcade service, which is $5 a month, and that is on Mac, Apple TV, iOS, and iPadOS. This is exactly what you would expect from What the Golf. You start off, and you're driving this car. You get through a quick little run. We did a quick look at a game called You Suck at Parking, and the way that those levels are designed, it's very similar structure to that. But when you get done to it, it's like, all right, cool. We're not really racing, and you should probably relax and stretch out a bit. And all of a sudden, 4 legs kick the wheels off the car, and now
watching the trailer for this.
Yes. You are.
This looks very dumb.
It's so dumb and so good, but there's one thing that they do that I think that works incredibly well from an input standpoint. It is touchscreen on mobile, but they have the top half of a steering wheel in the bottom left-hand corner, and you just put your thumb to go back and forth on that. And that works really, really well as like an input method because you're not needing to do like 360-degree turns. You just need to kind of go back and forth on some stuff. It's really well done.
So is it built in a similar way to What the Golf, where it's discrete levels that kind of surprise you every time you play?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is also, it does contain a level creator as well. So you can go in and build your own levels to do stuff with, which is really neat. It's not a traditional racing game in any sense. Like, it is fucking stupid. Like, you might have...
certainly not.
You might have a car that turns into a shark. You might have a car that has like a slinky body on it. You might have one that uses like big spider legs. You might have
like What the Golf was almost like a WarioWare game, except it kind of changed. It gave you a goal at the beginning of the level. It was like, oh yes, you want to hit the ball in the hole for the golf one. But then you'd start to use the mechanics, and you realize, oh, I'm not hitting the ball. I'm hitting the man who's hitting the ball, and now that's the thing I'm trying to put in the hole. So it would always kind of give you this same premise. So this game kind of has a similar thing of, okay, I'm driving this car, but then there's something weird about the car or the track or
correct
the wheels.
And you might not even be racing sometimes. You might be going off to another island to meet a weird character. You might be doing an actual puzzle. It's really cool. I'd like to figure out a way to hook up one of my other devices into this device and capture a quick look of it, because I think it's a really cool. It's been one of the better Apple Arcade games I've seen in a while, but they also launched with What the Golf on that. What the Golf later came to, I think it's on everything at this point in time, or damn near most things.
Yeah, I remember when it came to Switch, it was really expensive for something that I had played on Apple Arcade before, and I really liked it on Apple Arcade. And when my subscription ran out, I thought, oh, maybe I'll pick up the Switch version, and then the price was not correct in my opinion, so I didn't end up doing it.
So it's really cool. I've been putting in some more time with another mobile game that we talked about, Leia's Horizon. That's been a lot of fun to check out. So maybe we can do some quick looks on those. But then I've also played Showgunners, a game that we've got a quick look going up on, and one that we've streamed. This is a game from Artificer, and it's put out by Good Shepherd. It's got Borderlands meets XCOM in a way, kind of like Running Man game show. This has been one of the cooler turn-based tactical shooters. If you like XCOM, you're going to like this. It's a game show that you're working through an overworld, and your battles go into the grid-based version of that, and you have different unlocks that you can get. It's got skill trees. You can get different weapons with perks, kind of like Destiny stuff where, hey, these guys have Kevlar. This weapon has a Kevlar perk that is going to penetrate and give you a damage boost on it. The writing seems to be much better than that of Borderlands. It's only there stylistically.
That's a high bar to clear, man.
But I've unlocked one other character so far that has a really cool kind of like hacking biohacker. They can do a body swap where they take on the identity of one of the enemies and they put their identity on an enemy. So you get some really cool Into the Breach, fights in tight spaces, enemy on enemy action that feels so good when you pull it off. Got my ass kicked.
Decoy and part stealth in one power. It's a really cool power.
I did get my ass kicked on stream.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that we quick looked at. When did you first hear about this game? Have you talked about this before? Was this like a Next Fest something?
I think there might have been a demo for it. This came out on May 2nd. I heard about this game the demo's been out there for a while, and I saw that it was getting very positive buzz when it launched, so I went into it and checked it out more. And I wasn't going to pick it up because Tears of the Kingdom, but I'm like, Chase and I we don't have a game that we can fall into right now for casual Mondays. This seems like a perfect game for that.
Yeah.
And I picked it up a couple days ago, maybe a week at this point. We quick looked over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
It does work on. It works on the deck. It's very fucking good. I think this game's fantastic. I'm enjoying it. I got past that part on the stream, Chase, and I'm in a good spot now. I ended up the trick was to put both bodies down the right side to the far right button first, and then work your way up the corner. Because when we split them, it really fucked things.
Too many dudes.
But I kept them together, and as they started to come into that corner, I kind of just hunkered down and was able to use grenades and some of those canisters, and I made short work of it. It was good.
Very cool. Well, speaking of turn-based tactical strategy games where you have a limited number of allies, we did a spin of the wheel recently, and it landed for my backlog roulette for the month of May. It was on Mutant Year Zero, a game whose name I've continually forgotten and have always wanted to play and never did until now. I have played some Mutant Year Zero. I'm still relatively early. I'm only a few hours in. I think that game has some really cool ideas to it.
Yes.
So the basic premise for those who don't know, because this game's a bit on the older side at this point.
2016, 2017? Does that sound about right?
That's about right. 18? Okay.
What Steam says.
So basically humans have been wiped out by a plague virus thing. They call it the Red Plague. And there's one sect of humans that are still kind of around, and they've made this kind of last city, not Destiny last city, a different last city. They call it the Ark. And there are also these mutants out here, so like a pig man or a duck man, or a lady with like a spike in her head, and those mutants are called stalkers. And the elder, who's the head of the Ark, sends out these stalkers to go and collect resources or kind of do the dirty work of going out into what's called the zone, which is basically just anywhere else in the world that's not the Ark, because everywhere else is supposed to just be this kind of mass grave for everybody who's died in the plague, and to go scavenge for resources and keep the Ark running because people need to eat and people need to
drink. It's got a very European look to it.
Yeah. So you're playing as a squad of stalkers. You start out with the pig, whose name is Borman, and the duck, whose name is Ducks, and you eventually meet another.
Johnny is Borman.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
You eventually meet a third person. I just met her. I can't remember her name. It starts with an S, like Selma or something like that. And she gets added to the squad. So now you have a squad of 3. And what I think is really interesting is it blends the turn-based tactical stuff with when you're out of combat, you're just kind of walking around, and it's not like you're walking
resource
around
gathering
from. There's a little bit. It's more of just you're finding some
I thought you
currencies.
were. Yes,
Yeah, you're finding some currencies around the place. You're finding some maybe a weapons cache so you can get a new weapon. You are collecting some stuff, but it's not like you're not collecting mushrooms and shit to go craft something later. There's a workbench, but the workbench is just, you found 2 weapon mods while you were out there. Now you can put these 2 weapon mods on. But the interesting thing is that when you're walking around, you're not just walking around from level to level or encounter to encounter. You have more of a freedom and stealth vibe here. So you're walking around, and if you start to see, there's some enemies over there, you don't have to immediately and start the encounter. You can move around and even split up your group to say, okay, I'm gonna have the ducks go over here. He's gonna sit behind this tree in full cover, and he's going to hide now. So now he's hidden and he's just staying there. So even if the enemies are kind of walking around and kind of see his or get into his path, because he's hidden, he's probably fine unless they get up real close. So now I can have my other 2 members, they can slink around to this other side, and you can actually set up ambushes to have the encounter start with you getting an advantage. There's also even times there are a couple weapons that you encounter really early that are silenced, and you can even use those to pick off single enemies if you can do enough silent damage to just take them out before that encounter starts, and then that encounter doesn't really affect the other guys. So you can kind of just pick off, this guy's gone, this guy's gone, that guy's gone. Okay, now I can take this main force of this other 3 or 4 guys and see what happens. It's pretty punishing.
It's very hard.
I bumped it down to the easiest difficulty pretty early because you just get fucking messed up.
I remember that. Yeah,
it is. I wouldn't say it's darkest dungeon level of punishing. No. There aren't as many debuffs that are going on to you. Like, that's the thing that sucked for me about Darkest Dungeon is while I appreciate how skill based it is, the idea of having to go through all these debuffs just kind of made me not want to do it. Whereas this game, I think, gives you a lot of incredible powers and guns and things to think about, and then it says you're going to need to use all of these in a really smart way to get through these encounters. Like I haven't gotten this power yet, but one of the mutations you can get for the duck is that he can just fly, and he can fly for a couple turns, and then he can go up to higher areas, and he can get better cover there. And he also has some things that he can get some bonuses where he just gets passive extra critical chance if he's on a tile that is higher than the opponent. So you find ways of making him go into your sniper position so he can get those better hits. The woman who I just picked up, she has an ability that can turn half cover into full cover. So you can kind of have her not stealthily exactly, but you can kind of have her get in the middle of things and still tank stuff because she can dodge, or she can take a whole lot less damage by being in these places that normally wouldn't be all that safe for your other characters.
How are you liking? Let me ask you a couple questions really quick.
Yeah, please.
How are you liking the level design? Because you made some comments. I can't remember if it was Midnight Suns, about how tight quarters that was, and I felt like a lot of these early set pieces are pretty tiny in this one as well. Has that been an issue for you?
I wouldn't say it's been an issue exactly. Not at least the maps themselves. I'm fine with the amount of space I'm given and the amount of objects that I can use to take cover in some buildings. Here's a truck that's got a ladder on it, and I can run up the ladder, and then I can have this kind of higher sniper nest here. That stuff hasn't been a problem. What I feel like has been a problem, and this might be trying to play this game on a Switch or on a console, honestly, on a television, it's it's hard to read a lot of this stuff. One, it's literally hard to read. The default subtitles are fucking tiny, and even though it does have an ability to make those subtitles a lot bigger, it doesn't make the other text bigger. So anytime you get a gun and you want to try to compare the numbers on it, those numbers are tiny. When there's just like anything that is not a character talking is still tiny text, and it makes a game with a lot of UI, like a tactical turn-based strategy game, very difficult to play effectively, for sure. Also, the environments are just dark. It is a world where you're walking around and it's dark and you have flashlights, and that's fine, but it's also not very readable, especially from a couch as you're watching it on a television. If this was on, I mean, it is. If I was playing this on a Steam Deck, if I was playing this on a Switch really close to my face, if I was playing this at a PC, I think I'd be having less trouble with the just the darkness of the game and with the readability of some of these things. I think it would still be an issue because I think the game is just dark. But yeah, I think it's got a lot of cool mechanics to it. I like how it's stressing, I like how it's stressing me, and it's forcing me to stretch my thinking when it comes to, okay, I get 2 actions. Also, your weapons have ammo to them where you can only shoot them a couple times or maybe 3 times before they have to reload, very XCOM style. And so, okay, I can spend one of my actions to reloading this weapon, and then I can also shoot with this weapon, or I can swap to this other weapon, and it's stressful. It's just very
like
stressful,
a smoker
but it's
who will quit when they're damn well ready to. I love that you only would listen to yourself when it came to playing a game that you should have played a long time ago.
There's 1,000 games that I should be playing.
Correct.
And I needed the wheel to tell me which one was the actual one.
You only listen to yourself.
I think the wheel has turned out some good choices so far.
It has.
Your friends have better ones. If you like this game, I will also say hustle up, because the Bearded Ladies have a game coming out in like 2 weeks. I believe it's called
developer.
Yeah, is it Miasma?
Miasma, yeah.
Miasma.
They have Miasma, I think is how they pronounce it in the trailer.
Chronicles coming out. That looks really fucking slick. More sci-fi, still post-apocalyptic stuff, some cool abilities. But if you like this game Chase is talking about, there's a new edition coming out from them.
I'd also say if you like Mutant Year Zero, you should probably go play Showgunners too, because it does have a very similar feel. And,
Showgunners rules.
Showgunners has some really cool stuff to it. I mean, it's locked to PC right now. I think if that game came to Switch, I would probably be interested in playing that as well. But
Chase, you own PC and
I know.
Steam Deck.
God damn it, Chase!
Right.
You just fucking kill us.
I don't know. I like the Switch. It's nice. It's nice to play on a Switch. It's fun. I've also been playing another game.
Why did we do this, Johnny? Why did we do this?
I don't know.
Maybe if I had a video card in my,
you would play your Switch on your PC. Yes, we know. You would put your Switch
a capture card. Yeah,
we know.
One of these. If only I had one of these, then maybe I could.
Yes, you can capture things that your computer. Oh God, I'm sick to my stomach.
I gotta capture them all. I've been playing another game. I told you a few weeks ago that I wanted to do more itch games, more free itch games, and find cool little stuff. And I found a cool little thing. It is called Click, Build, Go, and it is Mechanics, the video game. I think this is really, really cool. It is who's develops this?
Is it on the Switch?
No, it's not on the Switch.
And how can it be cool?
That's a good question. It's difficult. The author is NCZ Moo.
Oh,
all one word. Yeah, your friend and mine. But the game is this person. I'm not gonna say he. I don't know. They say this is a re-release of a project I did a few months ago with some minor updates. It's a hybrid between an idle incremental game and an engine builder kind of board game, where I guess both of you, we've talked about engines before when it comes to decks and trying to figure out the right card mechanics to make your engine work. that is what this game is. You're building a deck. So they have what's called a tableau, and this is basically your collection of cards that are currently active. And you get a number of cards that you can choose that have a different cost, and you have so many hearts. And so you have to spend your hearts to get cards. Your cards go into your tableau once you've purchased them, and each one of these cards has a different if-then statement, or when. They call them when-do statements. So when you click, like, there's a card, like, when you buy a card, you get something else, and then you can get another card so every time you buy a card now, you're also getting another thing to happen. And you're just trying to find ways of building the mechanics in such a way that you build something that's broken to the point where you beat the game, or you lose the game. So you start out with only having 5 slots in your tableau, but you can get to a place. I had a card at one point that was, when you buy a card, you gain 1 tableau space, which meant I could just buy an infinite amount of cards and never have to worry about discarding my hand, because once you fill out your tableau, you can't buy any more cards. But then what you need to do is have a discard where you only have a certain amount of discards. But one of your mechanics might be, when I do something, I get a discard point, and then now I can spend that discard point, and I can add new cards to my tableau, and a different set of cards to that tableau. And there are cards that convert different currencies into things. So I could find a card that would convert my discards into more hearts, which means I can buy more cards, which means I can do more stuff in my tableau. And it tickled my brain in such a way of the pure mechanics of it all. I won the first time I played. It took a while because I had to discard my tableau a handful of times before I could get the right set of cards that went, oh, you actually just found an infinite loop and you just win the game now. And then the second time I played, I was so close. I was so close to getting this really broken thing, and I just ran out of hearts to be able to buy more cards, and I ended up losing the game that way. It's very simple. There's no real graphics to it. It's kind of just
text and little cards. Yeah.
It's just like a sepia toned card thing, and the cards don't even have visuals to them. It's just icons and text, and I think it's fantastic. I had a blast playing this game.
How did you find this game?
You go to itch, you look at free games, you find some stuff that's out there, new and noteworthy, that kind of stuff. This one runs in a browser, so you don't even have to. I try to prioritize stuff that runs in browsers, so I don't have to download stuff. Usually when I'm doing this, I'm on my MacBook Pro, because I'm not hanging around this PC all that much, or I'm in bed and I just want to check something out. So browser-based games are more interesting to me than trying to download something that runs, potentially not on a Mac.
I just wasn't sure if you heard like someone on Twitter talking about it.
This one's all me, baby. Just
JCK original.
Absolutely. So yes, definitely go check that out. It's nczmoo.itch.io/click-build-go if you would like to play this game as well, because I just think it's one of the coolest things. All right. Anything else we want to talk about before we get into the deep dive topic of the day?
No, I think we're good to go, man.
All right, let's do it. So there was some relatively big news that came out. One piece of that news was that Microsoft, I mean, you guys have known that Microsoft has been trying to purchase Activision Blizzard King, and there has been some questions of whether that is unfair competitively in the gaming space, and they have to go through a bunch of regulatory boards to be able to have that deal go through in various countries. And one of the countries that says, nah, I don't think so, was the UK and their governmental body called the CMA. So they blocked this merger, and Microsoft is appealing that, but that's a thing that happened last week. And then also last week, another big thing that happened was Redfall came out to
Thunderous applause.
It wasn't last week for the CMA. That was a couple weeks ago.
Was it a couple weeks ago? Okay, well,
yeah,
Redfall.
There was a cushion between that and Redfall. Unfortunately,
they had a week.
Yeah.
So two relatively big Microsoft/Xbox news stories of things going on. Phil Spencer, head of Xbox, big wig at Microsoft. He had a scheduled interview with Kinda Funny Games on their XCast show, which is an Xbox specific video game show.
The console wars are alive.
They never died. They never died, baby. He was scheduled to be on that and ended up continuing to be on that despite all the news that was going on.
So brave.
And he did what is being billed as a very tough interview. And Bobby actually brought this up to the other people here on the Casual Hour and saying, "Hey, this is something that's getting some traction. Is this something you guys have seen before? Maybe it's something we should talk about." And because it's my month for a deep dive, and I already have another kind of deep dive topic that's adjacent to this, we're kind of doing a double dive. And this week we're going to talk about this Xbox stuff, specifically this interview. And next week we'll talk about some more general video game news, video game press news stuff that's going on. So you both watched this interview. It's about a 40-minute interview.
Yep.
Hosted by your friend and mine, Snowbike Mike, who we've all heard of before.
Who
Absolutely.
Fuck is this guy?
No idea. I think he might have been like a mentee to Greg Miller from Kinda Funny. Greg Miller, even though he is like the big Kinda Funny guy, he is not on this podcast. It was this guy, Snowbike Mike. He was the main host and presenter. Gary Whitta, who's written for PC Gamer. He's written Star Wars movies. He's done a lot of things. He was also here. And then I cannot remember the other gentleman's name who was on Zoom here as a third presenter. And then Phil was the guest. Let's just start at the top here. What do you guys know about Kinda Funny? What do you know about this XCast before this interview had happened?
I didn't know the XCast existed.
Same.
I don't really follow Kinda Funny. That's not
Same.
To borrow a phrase that was popular a few months ago with Bobby. It's not quite my tempo. Bobby
made up that phrase, by the way. That's a Bobby piece original.
It is. So
Perfected it.
I don't know. I tend to find Greg Miller a little obnoxious, and as such, I don't go to his game coverage company that he runs. I'm sure he's a very nice man in real life, but his style of games coverage isn't my cup of tea.
I don't know if I've ever spoken to Greg Miller specifically. I've definitely seen him in person at a couple PAXs with like the video game wrestling stuff that was going on. He went to my alma mater. I don't think we were there at the same time. Maybe he was a senior when I was a freshman. I'm not sure.
Notable alumni.
Yes.
Notable people.
But yeah, I mean, he's always been obnoxious in a way, but I think he's we'll talk about this a little bit more next week, I imagine, but I think he's in this weird space where he's a little bit Danny O'Dwyer, a little bit Jeff Keighley, and then also a little bit just fucking unhinged.
Yeah, he's got some big Keighley energy, I feel like. Yeah.
And he's becoming one of the bigger guys in just that he is being tapped to do a lot of things. He hosts a lot of things. He's been on WWE stuff because he's
the Ryan Seacrest of nerd culture.
I think that would be Jeff Keighley, but he's
Keighley.
like, he's like the Ryan Seacrest.
He's
equivalent.
the Nick Cannon.
There you go. Yes, the Nick Cannon of video games, Greg Miller. Anyway, Greg Miller, again, not on this particular podcast, but he is the kind of the main guy from Kinda Funny. I also wasn't familiar with the XCast. I kind of thought we left single console evangelism style shows and sites and magazines in the past. But apparently they're still going. I mean, I know Nintendo weirdos are always keeping up with that shit. But
I mean, there's
at least
like
from an
Dual
Xbox and
Shockers.
Microsoft.
I just kind of assume they have a podcast.
I forgot DualShockers existed. I figured they died out when everybody else died out. But there's no official Xbox magazine anymore. There's no like that stuff just doesn't show up. So it surprised me that there was a specific podcast to all things Xbox. Because personally, I don't think Xbox has done enough to deserve its own enthusiast podcast about it. Bobby, you make a face. I get it. Like, they do stuff. There's services out there, but
you're gonna act like you didn't evangelize the 360. You're not gonna act like the Microsoft Xbox came in.
360 was a long time ago.
That's still Xbox brand, my boy. You can't come out here and say that Xbox doesn't deserve a fucking iconic podcast. The motherfuckers defined a whole generation, one of the most important generations of gaming.
I'm saying I don't think they deserve it in 2023.
That's not what you said, though.
It is. We were talking about how I didn't think this happens anymore. That yes, there were magazines back in the day. There were things.
Meant just Xbox either. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I don't think there should be a PlayStation exclusive. Like, our podcast isn't one console exclusive, despite how much I talk about the Switch. That doesn't happen. I don't feel like that happens anymore. And I feel like the kind of people who are interested in a single console style podcast are weird fringes of the internet that still think the console war is going on. Like it's World War II and they're at like some weird Philippine island that
Chase,
just didn't get the news.
Let's just
that
pause
the war's
for
over.
one quick second. You just 10-15 minutes ago on this beautiful PC that we've spent an absurd amount of time on said that you would check this out if it was on the Switch.
It's true.
You are the weird sicko fringe person that will pass up competent playing video games on other platforms for it to be on the Switch.
But I'm not a weirdo who's listening to Nintendo only podcasts. I'm not doing that.
I understand that, but you are at a point where you care so much about the ecosystem you choose that you will only, I mean, now whether people listen to podcasts or not, but you kind of evangelize one platform. You pass up things that are well played in other places.
I have a preference. You're right. Yeah, for
sure. I think it's very similar mindsets, in my opinion, of people who would only consume something that is garnered towards something that they care immensely about. I don't personally want to listen to stuff that way. That's not for me. But I think that we all have these nuances of like, hey, I have all these things here that can do this one thing, but I only want to hear it about this or play it on this. I guess a very similar mindset, in my opinion.
I'm not an Xbox fan. I'm a Snowbike Mike fan.
That's fair too.
There you go. Yes, I'm sure Snowbike Mike's mom and family and friends are all big fans. You know, this is shittier than I mean it to be. I just thought it was weird that in 2023 we still had one console specific podcasts. That seems weird to me, especially at a time where a place like Waypoint is dying, that Kind of Funny Games can afford a whole separate podcast that is just about the Xbox and
Xbox. It's
a
very tech industry or tech blog format. Like you can go to a lot of tech blogs and they'll be like, hey, here's all things Google, here's all things Apple.
Sure.
They still very much compartmentalize. It's very much mirroring that format more than like where I think games is at today. And even the tech wars, I feel like that's kind of subsided a bit, where it used to be very, very contentious on Android or Apple.
I mean, you still have, your Android authorities, your
totally.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess for me it was like, because Kind of Funny is not that old of an organization. So like having a newer media company that had that kind of podcast was strange to me. Because it was like, I remember like on Joystick, they had the PlayStation podcast and stuff. Anyway.
Yeah.
Do you think that's probably because people like at the time, like I know I certainly was like one console kid at that point in time.
Yeah.
I think that it was probably easier for folks to not have multiple devices to do similar things in their house at that time, where perhaps that made it more sense in the early 2000s to have publications that were more catered towards
it. For me. Because I don't know, like I kind of just lump all of that kind of news together. Like It's all just game news. So
I think there's also something to just like there is just more parity in in the video game space these days. It is, you think back to Sega versus Nintendo, and they had, I mean, there were a couple of games. There were certainly games that were on both systems, but for the most part, it was
all about
here's a Super Nintendo and they've got these games.
Yeah.
Here's a Sega Genesis, they had these games, and I think that fosters that culture war, that console war stuff more back at that time than you do now, where most of the games somehow kind of come out on both consoles.
Also, you can play them with everyone. Like, you know, Jude, my son, plays Roblox on the PC, his Xbox, and his iPad, and he's playing with the same people because it doesn't matter what platform they're playing on.
Well, that's how it should be. I mean, all cars use the same gas, but like there's still dickheads out there trying to say Chevy versus Ford's and thing.
Do we want to get into like
sorry,
conversation?
that was a pretty small thing. And the actual conversation with Phil, I think, has more of the stuff that we want to talk about. But I did find that odd, and I'm glad we had a discussion about it. The second thing that struck me when I was watching this is I just felt like Mr. Snowbike and his friends had very little understanding of kind of what was going on, especially with the CMA story. I think they're very well versed in talking about video games and understanding how reviews work and being able to ask those kinds of questions.
I mean,
and I think
maybe they were told by Xbox PR like, "Hey, Phil can't talk about this right now."
I don't think
they touched
that's
on
the
it
case.
lightly. Like Phil was like, "Oh, we're gonna appeal it," and that was kind of like the end.
There's
of the
so much litigation in that right now that I can't imagine it being something to like talk to a fucking podcast
but
about.
also, I just don't think these guys understand. And I'm not saying I do, but I didn't think these guys understood the bigger business implications of what a merger means to government agencies, where they're game press people, and I think they're like what they're good at is talking about game stuff, which is understandable. But also, you have Phil here, and let me read the quote here from Mr. Mike. But Phil, it's been a tough week in the Xbox universe, as you know. Of course, the CMA kind of blocking our acquisition of Activision Blizzard King. I know this sounds like quibbling, but when he says our acquisition, like you already can tell, like this guy just thinks of himself as part of Xbox. Like Major Nelson could have done this interview and it would have been like, I wouldn't have batted an eye, because Phil is coming to friendly territory. This is the "we're going to be nice to Phil" podcast. And Phil himself is the one that actually has to say what's going on. These guys weren't pushing anything about what this was. It's just, a merger was happening and it kind of got blocked and we don't really know anything. So Phil's the one who says the CMA have defined, this is a quote, the CMA have defined a market of cloud gaming that in my mind doesn't really exist yet today, but they have a point of view that maybe we have a lead in a market that is just forming, and that this content could somehow prohibit others from competing in that market, but will appeal. And that is kind of where it sits. In this 40-minute podcast, they spend maybe 2 minutes talking about this thing that I think has way bigger implications than whether Redfall's a good game or not.
I understand where you're coming from, but I do think part of what Johnny says is true. We don't know. We can assume that there's like, hey, we can't talk about this, or it can be like a simple question, don't press here. But I also think that perhaps if this interview would have happened 2 weeks prior, the tone would have been much different. You have to imagine, like, when this interview was taking place,
this might have been like a victory lap.
It's also a situation, though, like we just talked about it on Monday night when we were streaming, but Redfall is now in the top 15 worst reviewed games on Steam of all time. And I think that the internet has I mean, shit, dude, like we put out a quick look very different than what we traditionally do on our quick looks, where we pretty much just talk pretty scathingly about a video game and then took time to edit it and put it on the internet. I think that there is something to be said, because I have not, since Cyberpunk, honestly, seen anything quite like this. And I think that is more of a, why are you putting out terrible content versus buying more at the time? Not two weeks prior, sure, they would have talked about that more likely. But At the time of that recording, Redfall was literally the only thing we saw on most headlines, most review sites, most pockets of the internet.
I get that, but I still think we as consumers, we as commentators on what's happening here can ask for more. And yeah, there might have been stipulations to this interview. Hey, don't ask too much about the CMA, but I'm over here as a person who watched this interview and went, why didn't you ask him some actual tough questions? Because then all we got to hear after this interview, when Greg Miller did a follow-up podcast with Mr. Snowbike Mike and said like, oh, you did such a great job asking him these tough questions. And he didn't. They weren't tough questions. Phil's the one who had to actually explain what the CMA is, what it does, what its problem with Xbox was, and when you get to kind of control the narrative that way and say exactly what you want to say, I feel like that is some cowardly journalism.
I'll say that he only echoed out what was already shared by the CMA. And the other piece is, like, I'm nobody. I have a profession outside of this fucking podcast that has had to tiptoe around legal things. And I can tell you that my job would not allow me to continue a conversation if anybody brought up any semblance of a legal threat.
But you're not the boss of your division.
I was the boss of that was going on, but you have to understand, Chase, they're suing people over this. They're not going to talk about it on a fucking podcast. They're just not going to do it. They're literally suing the CMA.
He's saying he is, though. He's saying, yeah, ask me anything. I get that there might be something in the background, but I can still be pissed as a person who wants some actual fucking answers here to not just accept the limp dick shit that Phil says.
What do you want to know about this, though, that you don't know?
I want somebody to say, hey, Microsoft is worth $2.29 trillion. Sony, on the other hand, is worth $115 billion. Nintendo's worth $95 billion. That you're way bigger than both of these things combined. Do you not think that you taking one of the biggest third-party publishers out of the pool of contention for games to be on anybody else's systems, don't you think that feels a little anti-competitive? Don't you feel like you already have xCloud? Nobody else has kind of a cloud service at this point. Don't you feel like buying a giant publisher like this that can help you continue to build and make that a whole thing? Don't you think
you don't want to know what he has to say, though? You just want to rub his face in something. It's not what you said earlier.
I wanted to answer a question.
What you asked earlier, though, was you wanted to know more about the situation, which the CMA's put out there why they're like what he said they're going to say. I'm not here to say like I'm not here to talk about billions and trillions. Like, that's not my fucking place to talk about. But I think that there's an anti-competitive conversation. But I think you know what you need to know about it. You've formed an opinion and you want to validate that opinion. You don't need any more information. Like, what's he going to tell us about the CMA? You want to tell Phil, like, what you're doing is kind of a dick move, which is fine. But we know what we need to know about that. Yeah, I mean, I just think that, like, you got the answers you need. This is more about you just saying what you want to say.
I don't think so. I think you have to be able to ask people these questions and they have to come up with answers. And if they don't have satisfactory answers, then you feel even more validated by saying, yeah, you shouldn't get to acquire this company. This is PR for Phil. Him going on to this podcast and saying the things that he said and not getting pushed back, that's PR.
If you had asked him that question, he would have said, well, look at all of these long-term deals that we're signing with Nintendo and so on and so on. Like, they've made it plain, like, what they're willing to do.
And that's a conversation. You'd follow up by asking, okay, I see that you're offering this olive branch, but also you get to control everything here. Saying that Sony can make a deal for Call of Duty for the next 5 years and everything's going to be fine, that's not good enough. That's still anti-competitive.
I don't know.
It's just business, baby.
Yeah, man. Like,
this isn't gotcha journalism. This is just asking the right fucking questions and not just.
And maybe on the other end of this thing, you'll get to ask those. But I think that right now, man, like, if there's
on the other end of this thing is where they've already purchased Activision Blizzard King, and they don't care anymore.
It's being blocked right now. My whole point is
on the other end of this thing.
Correct. On the other end of this thing, if it gets completely denied, or if it passes through, you can ask those questions around where it's at, because there's fucking lawsuits for billionaire companies and trillionaire companies at this point in time.
But my point is him coming onto a podcast and being able to say basically carte blanche whatever he wants, because nobody's pushing back on anything that he said here. That is strictly PR for him. That puts good press about.
You went on an Xbox podcast, Chase. What the fuck did you expect?
Well, is he going to go out there and
expect
like,
people to
is he
know
going to
about
make his company
Xbox.
look terrible? No, dude. You just said that it's his own. You told me it wasn't my own business, but in this case,
I
it
don't
is
know.
his
Like,
business.
that was
Why would he get out there and make his business look shitty on a fucking podcast called Kind of Funny?
Because this shouldn't be PR. This is the press.
That's
this is what the press does.
That's
It's
what
not
his
the
job
press.
is.
They should be. There is no press. That's the problem. We don't have a press for video games anymore.
I think
we have yes men.
Man, while I appreciate what you're saying, I do. You're not going to have the head of Xbox back Xbox into a corner where they look bad. That's not his job. His job is to do exactly what he did, to spin it in a positive light.
I agree that Phil did exactly what he was supposed to do.
Correct.
I think everybody else fucking dropped the ball.
Well, then that's where I would think that you should
Phil was
point your
harder on
daggers
himself.
here.
Exactly. Phil was harder on himself than anybody else was. Phil's going, I feel everything's my fault and I feel so bad about it. But Microsoft.
That's what he's supposed to do as the boss.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think it's a journalist's job to come out and say, ask some real questions to get real answers. And if
I don't want to get ahead of you.
I think
I
you're
don't wanna
wanting
get
to
ahead
get
of you.
something out of this that was never going to happen. To
Yeah,
begin
I
with.
agree with that
it
for
was
sure.
never going to happen, and that's the problem.
Oh my god. I mean, god damn it, Chase. I don't even do this when I want you to play a fucking PC game, and that's not going to happen. But Jesus fuck, you have to understand that. Think about the whole story here. Xbox, for the last week, Xbox fans, what did you see happening to Xbox fans all week long?
They were pissed about Redfall.
Not a one did I see anybody getting dunked on around an acquisition. And if you
agree. I think that's a problem.
hang on. And you go on to XCast, which is, to your point at the beginning of this, what weird fringe sickos are listening to a singular content subject when it comes to like a podcast there. Phil went to what he thought would be the most direct voice he could take to the fans of Xbox and let them know, we never meant to do this. We never meant to do that. We did not want to upset you, because those are the ones who are getting shit on the most. And this was
fucking meant to be Charlie Rose.
No, yeah, this was him trying to get the most critical path to the people that were.
Who's the Charlie Rose then? Who is asking these questions to Phil?
That's
Who
a
is
conversation. That's a
putting his feet to the
conversation for next week, not for this.
Someone
I
at
think it is for
Bloomberg.
this.
Like,
I don't think it's this directly. I think it's more next
It's not
week.
going to
for
be.
sure.
It's not going to be a
The lack
person
of
in
press there
games
is.
media. It's going to be like a profile
If we just
like,
parrot the same stuff that Phil says and call it our podcast, then we're just doing PR for them, and I don't think that's fair.
Well,
I think Microsoft is potentially making an unfair playing field for the entire video game industry. We've certainly talked
what
about this
about
before.
a publisher that tells other publishers you can't put content on other platforms? You can only and it's not an exclusive deal. It's not an in-house thing. Like, to work with ours, to be on that and to have the highest market cap, you have full control over it in considering like more exclusive deals. Like, you are very quick and other people to talk about an acquisition of more content for exclusive titles, while there has been early map access, certain weapons that weren't even allowed on other things in a beloved game that you like. There's been multiple deals that have cut out entire player bases that weren't on that.
Sucks. I think somebody should ask the real questions to those companies to ask
Nobody's
them why
talking
they're
about doing that, though. Why is it only Microsoft? Like, why is nobody talking about that with the other companies?
Because this has gotten big enough where it gets government agencies involved, and
meanwhile, Disney can buy up every fucking public Star Wars,
and I think
Marvel,
that sucks.
And there's not anything that stopped that either. I think it's just interesting that why is it this?
It's not just this.
It's this
it's
in our world.
Everything
in our world, absolutely is.
Specifically, the United States government has been terrible with any of this shit. They've let Google buy everything they've wanted. They've let Disney buy everything they've wanted, and now we're really fucked.
So Chase, you don't have an Xbox. You haven't for a while.
I own Xboxes.
But you have an Xbox One that you hate. Then you hate your PC. But at the end of the day, when's the last time?
This isn't an anti-Xbox thing. I think this sucks for everybody. If Nintendo was trying to buy Activision Blizzard King, I would also be pissed.
Yeah,
totally. But like, why are you playing on PlayStation and not Xbox?
Well, I'm doing that, and that's because of something else that Phil says later. This is when they actually get into some good content because they're talking about Redfall, but then they talk later about just Xbox being in third place again. $2.29 trillion doesn't tell me you're in third place.
That's Microsoft. That's not Xbox.
I get that, but that is what they are.
The Xbox is certainly the least selling console, has been for 2 generations.
Sure, absolutely. But they also have enough money where they can do that. Microsoft has historically been a loss leader where they can get our stuff in any way we can, and then we can build it to be bigger. Yeah, absolutely. That's what they've done with everything, and that's what they're doing now with Game Pass and xCloud and things like that. So I think when the CMA is saying, "Hey, we've seen you do this shit before. We don't want to see you do that shit again," I think that's valid, and I think somebody should fucking call them on it.
Yeah. We shouldn't forget that what was it, in 99, early 2000s, whenever the Internet Explorer shit happened, like
same thing. They put on everything.
They got trust busted.
But to your question, Bobby, about why I play on a PlayStation, I think Phil has a really good answer for this. And he says we're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or out-consoling Nintendo. There isn't really a great solution or win for us. I see it out there. I see commentary that if we just build great games, everything would turn around. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way. We lost the worst generation to lose the Xbox One generation. We lost the worst generation to lose, the Xbox One generation, where everybody built their digital libraries. And that's the same for me. I had a PlayStation 4. I built my library of games there. And then if my option is to get an Xbox Series X, where I can have maybe a couple of the Xbox 360 games from way back in the day that would open up again, or if my option is to get a PS5 where I can keep playing all the games that I play, including Destiny 2, a game that I still, for some reason, continue to play. That's where I've built my library. That's where I've built my friends list. That's where I've built everything. So I think it's natural that I continue to choose PlayStation over Xbox, even if I used to play with Xbox in the past.
Fine.
And was very happy.
And I get all that, but I think that it's one of those situations too where the company that you've hitched your wagon to digitally has done some pretty shady shit as well. And
totally.
They're a giant corporation.
I was extremely against them buying Bungie. I don't know if you remember months ago when we had a podcast about Sony buying Bungie. I didn't like it.
And it seems to be serving you well. You've gotten one of your favorite expansions for a while. You continually play it. You haven't stopped. I
would not say that.
But I think that it's
people
also
were very happy with that expansion at all.
I think it's a situation where when we look at what they're trying to acquire, if it is truly the cloud aspect of it, one, I think that the data that they're using is assuming that what they legitimately, the CMA based that assumption off of numbers of Game Pass users. Johnny, when was the last time you played an Xbox Cloud game on Game Pass? The cloud.
A couple months ago on my Steam deck.
So I think that there's situations where, yes, people are using it. I think it's a really cool thing. But I don't think every person who is subbed to Game Pass is using that. And especially if you use like PC Game Pass, probably not a whole lot there outside of the Steam Deck, to Johnny's point. So I'm not quite sure like how they came to the conclusion that there was this monopoly on it when Amazon Luna is still present.
They didn't say there was a monopoly. It was that like
it was what?
There's the opportunity for a monopoly.
Correct.
Because especially Google has dropped out.
Google failed at it because they didn't know how to fucking run it, and that's
there's Amazon Luna. I don't know how popular that is. There's Nvidia's service. Like this is still somewhat fledgling. Like people are still figuring the tech out, right? Like,
yeah, and again, Microsoft has a head start on the tech, and also when you buy
more money
than
God,
publisher,
and are able to develop it more quickly than even other like tech giants like Nvidia. In Amazon,
and plus when you're able to buy a giant publisher who can put on 20% of the games on your service and take those 20% of the games away from other services, that gets to a point where it's an unfair competition. That's what I think the point is. It's not.
Well, that's not why it was being blocked by the CMA though. It was because of cloud, not because of games.
The games get to be part of the cloud. If there aren't any games, they didn't say anything
about the games. It was only about the cloud services. It didn't matter about the games.
I'm telling you that.
But no, you said that they said. You just said that.
I'm telling you that is a thing that people are going to worry about.
Yeah, I mean
yeah, it's not the argument for the CMA though.
No,
theirs is just purely cloud.
Yeah, I think this is an argument that goes into the cloud. I think if Microsoft owns all the game studios and then they make a cloud service, which is going to be the next way we play video games, and they already own all the fucking video games, that's a fucking monopoly.
I don't know. Like, I think that if you look at it from the cloud perspective, that's a completely different conversation than like game titles, and that was made pretty clear, I thought, in what they were talking about.
I feel like what Chase is expressing, and something that I feel myself, is like the further concentration of capital into the like pockets of fewer and fewer people isn't good for anybody.
Totally.
Except for the people that are, in the C-suites. So I don't know. I have very conflicting feelings about this potential acquisition, like, because the culture and environment that Bobby Kotick has fostered and like at Blizzard, like it seems real bad, and I would rather have places like Blizzard around and be under the umbrella of a company that seems to have a bit better track record of, like, not having things like that happen. So I don't know. I think it's bad that like so much consolidation has happened, but that's just capitalism.
I refuse to feel bad for wanting more games on a service I pay for. I refuse to feel bad about that.
I can understand that completely.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
We've talked about Game Pass before, that if Game Pass has all the games, at some point they can jack up the price. They can not have to care about making good games anymore if just the games are on the service and that's the service you have, and fuck you. We've seen it with Netflix. We've seen it with these other companies that get giant subscriber numbers and then get worse over time.
Totally. I mean, like, shit, Sony and Nintendo have both increased their monthly offering services with not the greatest content to go with it. I think that you can look at NSO as like having mostly garbage for the longest time. They finally added a few more consoles to it. Sony doesn't I can't even tell you the name of Sony's new tiers, and the shit that you get with it being pretty piss poor quality of the original emulations of those systems. I think back compat being paywalled to some of those things through that service is a fucked up thing to do. So they've all done it. Like, everybody does it. They all fuck. Netflix, Amazon's raised Prime so many times for it. It sucks. Like, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to stop paying for Amazon Prime because they've raised the price on it. It's too integrated in what I use now. Like, I fucking do everything.
Someday you might. If they put the price high enough, you might have to, or you might not be able to because you're so dependent on it.
But I'm just saying that I've been using these.
That money for steroids. Okay?
I've been using.
What I just heard you say is that Jeff Bezos can say, "We can gouge Bobby Pease because Bobby Pease says he's going to pay it." No, I'm going to
keep paying for Amazon Prime. Absolutely, I use Amazon Prime every fucking day. It's part of how. Like, I'm not going to not do it.
Yeah. The point where they're charging you more than you feel like the service is worth.
And it sounds like Bobby's never going to get to that situation, which tells Amazon, all right, let's raise the price again because he's going to pay it.
But that's the choice I'm making. I'm bought into that ecosystem. I'm bought into that service. I want those things. And I can afford to do that.
Everybody else has to pay the high prices too. We're all going to end up paying more high prices. Then Amazon gets even bigger. And Amazon doesn't need to get any bigger. Amazon's pretty fucking big.
Dude, you're not going to fucking slow Amazon down. It's not going to happen. You can't stop it.
You're taking this defeatist attitude. You're not even trying. Like, that's
the problem. What like, are you gonna fucking like burn down Amazon? No, it's not gonna happen, dude. It's too big.
There was only some kind of government agency out there, like some sort of CMA, that could start to block one of these things.
Dude, maybe it's not gonna happen in our lifetime, and it might not even happen in the one behind us. It's just not gonna happen.
But you have to fight to try to make it happen.
No, you don't. You don't have to do that at all. Your life would be exponentially easier if you didn't fight.
I don't think it would be. I don't think it would be.
Why be outraged when you can be content? Fucking deal with it, man. It's just what it is. What it is. It's not changing.
Because they're going to keep turning up the temperature, and you, as the frog, are just going to say, "Yeah, this is fine by me," and then you're going to fucking boil.
If I boil, I boil, dude. I hope I boil. Then I won't have to listen to this anymore. Then I won't have to worry about people telling me how to spend my money or what I should or not want on those services.
Do you guys want to talk about Redfall at all with the last 20 minutes we have and what went on here?
No. I don't ever want to talk or think about Redfall ever again.
I think Phil had some good answers. They asked him a specific question, which I thought was maybe the best question they asked, about delaying games. They talked about how Halo Infinite had been delayed. They talked about how Redfall had been delayed before, but seeing the game come out and the problems that it has, should it have been delayed again? And I think Phil had a good answer for this. He says, and I quote, if I think about a team's execution on a game, we had a creative vision, and did we realize that vision through the game that we created? That's not a delay question if the answer is no. I think there's a fundamental piece of feedback that we get that the game isn't realizing the creative vision that it had for its players. That doesn't feel like a, hey, just delay it. That feels like the game had a goal to do one thing, and when players are actually playing, they're not feeling that. When a game needs to be delayed, that what we did with Halo, what we did with Starfield, what we did with Redfall, because the production timeline is saying we have this vision and our game production timelines don't get us to the completion of that vision, we do delay games. I think that's really interesting, and makes a lot of sense. That yes, you can just delay a video game, but what are you actually doing with that time? Can you change? What problems can you fix? Can you fix some bugs? Absolutely. Can you fix fundamental problems with the game? Can you fix systemic problems with the studio? Maybe not. If you need way more time than that, you might have to ditch resources to do that. One of the things Phil didn't say, but is just kind of implied by basic business, is that at some point you need a return on your investment, and you can keep delaying Redfall and you can keep paying the overhead for Arcane Austin for them to continue working on this, but at some point Redfall's not going to get them the money back that they have put in, and you just have to cut bait. And he's never going to say we're going to cut bait on Redfall, because that's telling
cancel it or just put it out there.
Totally. And at this point, I don't think they could have canceled it. It's too finished to do that. Yeah. But I thought that was an interesting answer, especially when consider how many other games get delayed and why sometimes they get delayed.
I mean, there's probably a better story to be told there on why we haven't seen some of the things from 2017, 2018 from those acquisitions. Maybe that's why we've only seen the fairy flying in a Fable teaser. There's probably some reasons to. They've had most of their big tentpole items. I'm pretty sure like Halo, Redfall, I think Forza was not delayed. I think that's one of the only ones that I can recall, but they've had significant delays in a lot of these items. And it's probably easier just to not show it or put anything next to it until you have a better window. I mean,
think about COVID.
What about COVID? Oh, just looking to work from home stuff.
Hacking on probably,
changing the way studios work.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
What their outputs be able to be.
I have to imagine, like, if we weren't living through a pandemic, then like a lot of those games probably would have come out already.
I wonder if that GTA leak that was either late last year, earlier this year, I can't fucking remember, but I wonder if that's impacted like where files and sharing and collaboration was taking place, just kind of given
it was all in Slack, right?
That was wild. But like maybe there's something with that too, just on like, I think that coupled with I think Cyberpunk is also in the pandemic, but I really feel like that was kind of this watershed moment for what happens when a highly anticipated game comes out in the state that did, and where studios are to blame, where stockholders are to blame, board members are to blame, and all these things that have been happening with COVID, way we work, bad fucking ports, all this shit. There's probably, I would say, a little fear out there potentially of like, fuck, we can't have a Cyberpunk situation. We don't have, like, CD Projekt Red was only putting out a handful of games to begin with. They can throw themselves at Cyberpunk to make it better. So can Hello with No Man's Sky. Some of these other places, like to Chase's point, Arcane's going to cut bait and fucking go. They can't make this a No Man's Sky 2.0. They got to go work on whatever the fuck they're going to work on. It's not going to happen. But other studios, like, it's cool to see it happen. When it happens, like, I love to see him win. I love to see him fix it. It took years, but not everybody's going to fucking do that. There ain't no way.
Right. I mean, we saw that with Anthem.
Anthem
they even tried both ways. They even said, "Hey, we're going to take this dark. We're going to fix this game, and then we're kind of come back out."
Close your eyes. Look at the flowers, Anthem.
EA said, "I don't know if the wallet says that makes sense. What if we just didn't do that?" And then they didn't do that.
That one still stings the most, man. That one.
I bet so.
That stings the most. God
And,
damn.
I could see a world where Arcane Austin goes back and reworks this game in a way and does have a No Man's Sky type reversal of fortune.
That'd be cool.
But I also, like Bobby, understand the reality here that they probably have like their one or two chunks of DLC that they've already have in their pipeline for a while now. They can make some technical patches. Maybe they can change a mechanic or two here or there to make the game more palatable to players. But if this game has had such systemic issues to be put out in this way now, I don't necessarily see them being able to turn this game around and put out basically a whole different product within the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months and make it into something that people are going to go, oh yeah, they really nailed it. They really got to that point.
Redfall.
Yeah. It's weird. I don't even think that Redfall would have been a console crusher though. If that was a 10 out of 10.
No.
Like this, the design of that game, like kind of a here today, gone tomorrow vibe with, there's going to be more of those for sure. I don't know if that would have been like, I don't know if Chase would have, even if we would have been raving, if like I use Chase as the example here just because he has a means to play it, would have gone and played it or bought into a service that he maybe like. I don't think that Redfall would have been the final fucking sub to Game Pass moment.
I mean, I have a means to play Halo Infinite right now, and I can tell you, I ain't gonna play Halo Infinite right now.
It's not, smart move.
It's not gonna work out. Did you guys think it was interesting how much they talked about review scores in this interview? That one also felt a little console war to me. Like, oh, I thought that was kind of back in the past.
Well, I mean, like just like what you said around like the singular focus publication. Like, I've seen more of those websites ditch their review structure and just talk about games versus scoring a game. But I think that this game came out to such a critical reception that it was pretty jarring. I mean, the only other game I've seen score worse this year is Harry Potter, and a lot of that had nothing to do with the gameplay and more about the principles around it. And I mean, I think IGN gave it a 1 or a 0 or something, if I remember correctly. But anyway,
yeah, something like that. Are you like how much are you? And this, I guess, dips into some of the stuff that we'll probably talk about next week. How much are you actually paying attention to scores? I know when we've done quick looks, I've heard you say, "Hey, this is mostly positive on Steam," or "It's getting a lot of user reviews." But like, we don't talk about Metacritic shit here almost ever.
No.
I know that's still big in the industry, but
I enjoy reading and watching reviews.
Yeah, same.
From certain voices that I enjoy hearing from. But like, I'm gonna buy what I'm gonna buy. It's usually, unless it's something that is a complete unknown to me, my decision to make a purchase doesn't really hinge on. Unless like with Redfall, it was like, oh god, oh damn, that's rough.
I also think that like we have had a show for, I mean, I just got the tweet tonight when we were recording. 7 years ago today, we set up our Twitter account. And for 7 years, we've been talking about why we care about certain games. And so I think that people can probably start to piece together, hey, this is, when we do it on our monthly previews, like this looks like a Bobby Ask Bobby game. Like Bobby will like this. You know my style, you know what I'm looking for, and you're going to hear me go into a deeper presentation usually on, is this a better Subnautica than Subnautica? And I'll talk a little bit about my experiences, and you know that I care about it. And same for tactics, same for 4X strategy for you two. We might not give scores here, but I think when people see us, for the most part, quick look something, they know we care about it or enjoy it. We've put time into making that. And I think
that's why every game that we quick look gets a 7, right?
Jesus. I mean, if you give them all 7s, you can't be fucking hung out to dry. And I think that's the piece too, though, is like, how do you weigh it? Because I would much rather be able to, like, we've done this for other podcasters. We've been like, oh, I bet so-and-so is going to like this game. Or we'll say like, hey, what did so-and-so say about the game? Oh, they didn't like it? Well, that's weird. Versus what did so-and-so give it? I think that we've gone from like, we want to go deeper in our analysis of things. We just don't want a number anymore. Like, well, how did you get to that number? Because then you have to go read and hear it. So I'd rather just know, like, tell me the story of where you got to that number. Then I can relate. Oh, okay, you gave it a 4 because it did this and that, not this and that. So that's just how I
Totally.
approach it.
And that, I think that's a good preview of stuff that we'll be talking about next week for sure, as we talk about what a video game review is, what it does, if we still need it at all, or if we do need it, what do we actually need out of it. What I found like interesting, he's talking about, you know, they do their mock reviews at Microsoft, where you have, maybe it's somebody who used to be in the industry, maybe it's a freelancer or whatever, they're playing the game. Yeah, like they're given a consultant fee to basically just write a review that will never see the light of day in the public, but to just say, hey, here's what you should expect from the actual reviews that go out.
Sure.
And his point was that it was surprising that he said it's surprising to them. Now, again, this might be some PR stuff of like, oh yeah, we thought the game was going to be much better than this. Like,
I mean, he said it was in the 80s.
Did he say this was in the 80s? I think he said like, we make some games that are in the 80s, we make some games that are in the 60s, but we were surprised how low this one was.
I saw a quote floating around there that like Redfall specifically, like their internal reviews had it in the 80s.
Okay.
The one thing we can talk about this next week probably, but I'll say like a site, you mentioned Metacritic. There's no validation done, and not that it happened with Redfall, but like I'll go back a few more weeks to Burning Shores and the review bombing that took place because there was a moral decision to do so versus a technical of the actual quality of the game. It was more about an orientation matter for Aloy that people went in and just bombed it, and you don't have to link anything into these reviews. So I think that can be a little challenging whenever, like, how do we, especially like these user generated reviews or like these collective reviews, do they really represent the stuff that we were talking about from it? Like that score that Redfall got, that's like, where is that coming from? So I think that's just something to call out too. Like the platform has been opened up more for people to contribute a dialogue, a Discord, or even a score to. And like, I think the same thing for Steam, when you asked, like we mentioned Steam reviews and things like that.
I mean, it is interesting because you get people who have, I mean, there's certainly value. There's certainly somebody's valuation of something is going to be different than mine, where it, you know, the orientation stuff that goes on with Aloy might really matter to somebody to the point that they think it's absolutely terrible. And I can totally understand that there are also people out there who are in bad faith, or at least gray faith, like review bombing, and that certainly happens. But I think there's also some people out there who could have a valid reaction that, I mean, we've certainly had it, or a game that's been generally good we don't like. I guess that's more a me thing. I'm the one who hates things, but can have like a visceral reaction to something in a way that, okay, I can tell you that Braid is probably on a technical level a fine game, and if I had to quote unquote objectively review it, it would probably get around that 7 area. But if you bring in how I feel when I'm playing that game, and some of the decisions that Jonathan Blow made in that game, and I go, I fucking hate this, and that's valid. It's not objective exactly, but then what is objectivity?
Yeah, but you didn't go and give that game a 4 or a 2 because Jonathan Braid kissed a guy.
No, but I mean, again, I think if
that's what's happened with Horizon, I'm saying it's like that they were just like,
I get that, but I think somebody could have a reaction that whether morally, I don't know. People have their own opinions with things,
for sure.
And I agree that sometimes they suck. But that's what opinions are.
Well, yeah.
So that's why I think aggregated sites like that are stupid to begin with, and then I think it's even stupider that you get companies like Microsoft who pay bonuses or like take validation out of these reviews and use them for monetary or financial stuff. I think I would actually be really interested. We're never going to hear Phil tell us exactly, but what is the difference financially between an 80 game and a 60 game? Is your 60 game going to lose 20% of its value when you put it out there because it got bad reviews? How much does the review actually impact the money that you make on some of these games? And I know it'd be different case by case, but even just averages, like does does that actually matter? You mentioned, I don't know if it was off air or earlier, that Redfall is the second most popular Game Pass game right now, and it's in, what did you say, top 13 for
it was
something?
Top 12 last week. It just went down one to the top 13. It's in 13th place for the most played games on Xbox currently.
So it is, I mean, part of that is just the newness of it's the new game in town and people are playing it, but also people are playing it. And would more people play it if it was reviewed in the 80s versus in the 60s? I don't know, because
Probably.
Again, I thought reviews were like a thing of the past with putting a number.
I mean,
on
we had
things.
somebody, like, not that it matters, but we had somebody pop in when you and I are getting ready to record Redfall. I had it open. We had somebody hop into our Discord voice channel, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're playing Redfall? Why?" And we're like, "Oh, we're actually getting ready to record a video on it."
Because we're journalists, goddammit.
And I mean, I've never had that happen with anything else that we've ever been in there. Like, I've never been in that situation. So I think there's also just I'm going to turn myself to offline to play this, like a guilty pleasure type thing. Maybe, I don't fucking know. It's not like there's not content out there, but I think if you are only on if you're only on Xbox, it's kind of barren on exclusive stuff. So you're going to sink your teeth into what you can, I guess.
Sure. And I mean, that seems to be Xbox's strategy of, hey, we know that, like Phil said, we're not going to out console Sony, or not going to out console Microsoft or Nintendo. We have to find a different way of doing things. And the different way that they've been doing it is services through xCloud, through Game Pass, through acquisitions and getting libraries and putting those things. It makes me think about the WWE in the same way that they acquired tape libraries of all these other smaller wrestling organizations, and they could make their network so filled with content because they had the money to just kind of bully out all the little guys. And then even before that, to become the WWE, they had to buy out all the different territories way back in the day to become the big, basically, monopoly that they are. I mean, yes, there are some other smaller wrestling organizations out there, but they're not the fucking WWE. I just think it's interesting. And I know, I mean, obviously I was disappointed by this interview. I don't think I was going to come to a Kind of Funny Xbox themed podcast and go, ooh, yes, very, very sharp journalism happening here. But I still think there's validity to calling out when I think something sucks, and having people be better.
We know.
You know, the only way to get better is for people to know that they need to get better.
That you suck.
Like, that's
if the take's worth it, yes. Agreed.
I think the future of video games is worth it to make a fuss that somebody should ask Phil Spencer some tougher questions.
I don't know if Phil Spencer has the staying power to control the future of video games by any stretch.
He has a 33% stake in the future of video games by my eyes, by my vision.
What do you have?
It's very little, but I think if enough, you know, if a billion people listened to this podcast and heard my rage and told Phil, Chase Koeneke, he's pissed at you, maybe something would change.
He'd call you up.
That's on you, listeners. Go share this with your friends. Go tell them to go to thecasualhour.com. See our link tree, follow us on Twitch, follow us on YouTube, follow us on TikTok. I mean, you all already are following us on TikTok, apparently, because we're blowing up.
We're doing
right, Bobby?
We're doing some stuff on TikTok.
Hell yeah, that's great.
I think that we've I don't think we've had a viral sensation yet, but we're definitely getting a little bit more conversations over there right now, and getting to hear from some cool people around their thoughts on some of the stuff that we're talking about, which is fun. So there's some neat stuff happening in that space. Certainly better than what's happening on Twitter.
Well, that's for sure.
We're gonna have a non-compete clause that we're gonna rip up and just start doing our show on Twitter. Fuck all of you guys.
Yeah, we had $25 million coming to us, and we said, nah, let's talk about it on Twitter. Yeah. That's a topic for another time. Speaking of topics for another time, next week, like I mentioned, we will be talking more about the state of games journalism, games coverage, games press in general. I hope that is as spirited and fun as this debate was. So I'm looking forward to that. Bobby, what else do we need to do to get out of here?
We have a lot of fun stuff this week. You can go back to Twitch and see some more video on demands, or you can head over to YouTube, as Chase talked about. That's youtube.com/casualhour. Links are there in chat. We've got a quick look up of Redfall. It's probably one of our more critical ones, and you can get some really good takes on where Game Pass is at and where that game is at. Tonight was the A side to the B side that you'll get next week, as Chase called out, when it comes to journalism and games. Thursday, we have a quick look of Showgunners going up, and Friday night, if we can pull Hyrule out of our cold dead hands, Johnny and I are going to head back to hell for the server slam weekend of Diablo 4. They've got a potential in-game goodie if you take out a boss, and all of our progress carries over, so we'll have a chance to maybe get a really neat trophy mount for your ride that you have there. So that's what we're up to this week. A lot of fun stuff. Chase, yourself, what do you got going on?
I have a new episode of the podcast I do with our good friend Pierce Corshane called Pilot Program. We watched the first episode of Sailor Moon, and I watched it 3 times because I had to watch the original Japanese that was subbed. I had to watch the 1995 Deke dub that is interesting, and then the 2014 Viz Media dub, which is more faithful to the original Japanese. It was a really good conversation. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about H.W. Bush. We talked about Steve Urkel. We talked about Murakami books. It's a very wide-ranging discussion, and it was a lot of fun. You can find that at shows.acast.com/pilot program, and we announced that our next episode is going to be on The Shield, the Michael Chiklis cop show. I don't know anything else about The Shield, but I will in 2 or 3 weeks, I suppose.
He's a crooked cop.
That's what I hear. Also, call your mom this weekend. It's Mother's Day, so
Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Play a video game with us.
Yeah. That's all I got.
Very cool. We'll be back live on Friday, straight from hell, with Diablo 4. Happy Tears of the Kingdom Eve, everyone. We have made it. So we will chat with you all very soon.